Alright, today we're going to create a worm bin for people who live in apartments and who are not so much interested in the castings from the worms, but more interested in their ability to break down food scraps and things of that nature to keep us from filling up our landfills and just to be a greener and healthier planet that we live on. So, you're going to need a drill with a little bit on it, some tape, a pair of scissors, silicone, spray paint. It doesn't matter what kind of spray paint, and you can also use masking tape for this, or even a marker, but that'll take forever for you. Some bedding for our worms to live in at first. I actually got this shredded paper from my office, but you can use shredded newspaper and just shred it into little pieces. It doesn't have to be like this. You're going to need one top, and you're going to need 2 containers for your worms. These are actually 1.6 quarts, and the containers have to be the same container because you slide one into the other. I really like the containers with the flip lids because it allows you to get 2 containers together, and it actually boosts them up a little bit so that there's a gap in the middle. The other thing you're going to need is some screen. And I purchased actually this from one of our big home improvement type stores. I also got the containers from the home improvement type store. Altogether, parts, I spent maybe less than $10. So, let's get to our first thing we have to do. Okay, the first thing we need to do is we need to take the container that's going to be the inside container, the ones that the worms actually lived in, and we're going to drill a bunch of holes in this. And I put them all over the place. Especially if there's any sort of ridge, put them on the outside of the ridge because there's going to be moisture in this, and that moisture is going to drip through into your second bucket. So I'm going to drill a bunch of holes. And when I'm done, I'll be right back. Okay, as you can see, I've drilled a bunch of holes. I've cracked it in a couple places. Don't worry about that. That's not important. And I've drilled out one that was a little bit bigger. Again, no worries. We're going to put screen in here so your worms won't escape through the holes. These are actually for oxygen. The ones on the bottom are for drainage, and then the sides I put in. Worms do need to breathe, and if you have this tight in the other container, or if you don't have enough holes on the sides, they'll actually suffocate. If you happen to get 2 containers that fit very snugly into each other, go ahead and find something plastic that you're going to throw away anyways, or maybe a crushed can. Put it inside this one so that this one sits up a little bit. Also notice that I kept these holes a good 2-3 inches down from the top. When we set this in together, we're going to be putting screen in here, and of course you want the screen to be up above the holes so that your little worms can't get in there. So, next step, we're going to take the container that does not have holes in it. This is going to be your drainage, and I'm going to take this outside and I'm going to spray paint the outside of it. It doesn't matter what color, and I'm not spray painting the inside, I'm actually spray painting the outside. And the reason for this is to keep it dark for the worms. Worms don't like to be in light, and even though you're going to probably be keeping this under your counter or someplace like that, it's just better to have a dark outside container. If you don't have spray paint or can't paint, go ahead and get some duct tape, masking tape, anything that'll darken this up so that your little worms will be happy on the inside. So I'm going to go spray paint, and again, I'll be right back with you. Okay, we see here my spray painted green bucket, and as you can tell, it needs another coat. So I'm going to take this back outside and hit it again. hints about some spray paint. One, you always want to spray paint thin layers. You don't want to put it on real heavy thinking you can get away with just one coat. If you put it on real heavy, a lot of times the bottom will dry, the top won't, you'll get a crack. The other thing about spray paint is if you have fingernails or a bad top, you'll notice here, you'll wind up with spray paint under your fingernail. So it's always nice if you don't want to have to deal with that, to get some plastic wrap and just, wrap it around your finger. When I go back out there, this is what I'm going to do. And that way I keep spray paint off of my hands. But we're going to spray paint this at least 2 more times. Be sure to leave enough time in between coats so that you get a good dry. I happen to be down here in sunny Florida, so the sunshine's going to take care of that for me in about 30 minutes. Okay, while we're outside with our paint job drying off, we're going to take the bucket with the little holes in it, and we're going to take our piece of screen. We're going to put our screen, kind of line it up, and push it in. There's going to be wrinkles in it, but that's alright. We get it as far down there as possible, and try and make sure the edges are all above the lid cover, because when we get done, that lid cover is going to go on the top, and that's going to be our seal to keep everything inside this bucket. Worms are little escape artists, and they will go for an escape, little joyride, if you don't have them sealed in there well. So, we're going to cut or line up the edge with one side. We're going to get pieces of tape, and this is just temporary to hold on to it, and we're going to hold on to it on each side. And then we're going to go around, and we're going to cut off our edge. Make sure you're nice and folded in there. You want to do this a little bit at a time so that you don't cut off too much, or you'll wind up at the other end without enough on this side. So, we're just going to go all the way around like this. Okay, as you can see, I have it all cut down and trimmed, and I have pieces of tape holding the outside in place so that it doesn't pull out on me. And now what we're going to do is we're going to start with our silicone, and we're going to silicone this into place on the inside edge. That'll keep the screen down and tight, so eventually you're going to have to empty this thing out, and you're going to want to be able to take it outside, flip it upside down after you harvest a couple of your worms or a good portion of your worms, and then of course you'll be able to bring it back into your home and throw your worms back in and start all over again. But that silicone is going to keep this screen in place, which is a good thing. I also have a glass of water. And the reason I have the water is if you've ever worked with silicone, you know that silicone doesn't stick to water. So when we start, we lay a nice bead . Okay, my silicone was actually seized up in the front, so while I was squeezing it came out the back. That's okay, I wasn't going to move it around with my finger anyways. But if you have a good silicone gun, squeeze out a line of silicone, and then you want to wet your finger so that the silicone smooths easily, and then smooth it on the inside. And you want to get it through the screen and down to the plastic. Like that. And basically you want to go around the entire edge and make sure that you're through that plastic and all through the screen and all the way down to the plastic. Now anywhere where you see a bundle like this, it's going to be tougher to get in there. So be sure to get your, you're going to have to push it down and really squish it and squeeze it and make sure that it goes through all of the little holes and down to the surface of your plastic bucket. Now, silicone's benign. The worms won't bother with it and it won't hurt them. And it's easy to manipulate, and obviously squeezed down in there, and it holds for a long time. I mean, I've had silicone not come loose from plastic for years before. I actually have a large version of this. I have two that I've had for 14 years. Worm bins. I kept them in my apartments. I used to live all in apartments, and I've kept them in my apartments, and they never got bugs. They don't smell. People think that, oh, you know, that's disgusting. You're going to have a smelly mess. And they don't. They don't smell at all. The only time I ever got bugs in my worm bins was when I moved them outside once into a shed. And that's when I wound up with roaches in the worm bins. And, you know, frankly, the roaches didn't seem to bother the worms at all. I wasn't too pleased, but the worms didn't seem to be bothered by it. So you're not going to have to worry about, you know, this being smelly or anything like that on the other end of when we get it done and in your kitchen. So I'm going to finish this up, and silicone actually takes about 12 hours to seize properly, and then it takes a good 24 hours to completely solidify. Now, silicone will never completely become hard. You can't use liquid nails for this. Liquid nails eventually will become a solid material and come away from the plastic. It won't stick to the plastic for very long. Silicone, this is 100% silicone, and you can buy it anywhere. If you go down and buy a tube, be sure to look, because there are a lot of tubes from our stores that say things like caulk and tile and window lining, and those items have other chemicals in them. They're not always 100% silicone. Sometimes they are, but sometimes they're not. So look for that 100% silicone label on the front of the bottle. The other thing about silicone is if you mess up, if you get silicone on your table or on your chairs, or you know, somewhere where you really didn't want silicone to be, don't try and clean it up immediately. Wait for it to solidify, and then it'll be a nice bead, and you'll be able to grab a hold of one end of it and just rip it off in a nice big piece. There won't be, you know, goo like this. If you try to clean this up now, everything's going to look like this, and you're going to thin that silicone out to the point that when it does dry, you're going to have a hard time getting it up. Big chunk of silicone, a big bead of silicone, pull up one edge, it'll rip right off, no problem at all. So that is, I'm probably going to go around this thing maybe another time to make sure that it's all in and the screen is all matted down real well. And then this is going to take about 24 hours to dry. So we're going to see you in about 24 hours with our outside and our inside and the next step of our process. Okay, we have our screened in little bucket here that we're all set, and this has been sealed into the inside. We're about 18 hours later now. And I'm going to use a little knife as opposed to the scissors. You can use scissors, but the little knife or razor blade actually works a little bit better. So I'm going to go along the edge here and cut just straight up. I'm going to cut off the lip all the way around. And on these tough spots, I'm going to cut down as opposed to up, just so that I don't run the risk of pulling it off. Okay, we've cut off our sides, our tops, and as you can see, there's a couple little levels that are a little bit bigger, and that's fine. I generally just leave them. What you want to do is get your top and push it down real tight. Make sure you can clip it on or pop it on or however it seals. Make sure that you get a pretty decent seal, which I do. So I'm pretty happy with this, and I'm gonna go with it like it is. And this is our bucket that I spray painted on the outside, but any way you darken it up is fine. And it fits, if I put these up, this fits right in here. And our worm home is ready to go. Now what we're going to do is fill it with worms, obviously. So I have large bins actually outside, and you can get worms out of the yard, but it's kind of tough to do it that way. You can purchase them online. I go with European red wigglers because they eat 10 times their body weight, and in an area this size you're going to need something that really goes through and eats a lot of food. So let's go and let me show you how to get started here on your worm bin. Okay, I've gone outside and pulled out probably about 30 worms, which, believe it or not, if you can see, they only come up to about here in this cup. I'm not going to need much more. These are adult worms, and more than likely, as soon as they start getting fed real well, they're going to go nuts and they're going to breed like crazy, which is basically what all worms do. So, to help that along, this is actually a piece of cardboard structure that I got out of a Christmas present, the kind that, you know, you sit it in and the whatever you're buying sits inside of it. This is really heavy cardboard paper. Worms love this stuff. You don't have to have this. You can use a piece of cardboard or even like the newspaper will work and the shredded paper will work, but worms really love this heavy-duty cardboard, or construction paper too will work. And they love to lay their eggs on this stuff. They will do it in the paper, they'll do it on food, but they really like a heavier cardboard, and that really inspires them, I guess, to lay a bunch of eggs on here, which is what I want. I want a lot of propagation going on. So I'm going to put these in here just so you can see how many I've got in this little section. And as you can see, they kind of clump together into a little group there, but that's all I really need for this size. So we're going to take our little green bin, and we're going to put it inside our other one, and we're going to put our little levers down. Now I have enough air that the circulation will probably be fine, but like I said before, if you are real tight together, you're going to need to put something down in here to boost this up a little bit to give yourself a little air pocket. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put in just a little bit of bedding so they have a place to go to. Worms will automatically go to the bottom no matter what, and then they'll start hunting for food. So I'm going to put in just half of my little shredded paper. Then I'm going to take my little cardboard piece and stick that in there. Now I've wet this. As you can tell, one side is, or maybe not, one side's wet, the other side's dry. I've wet it pretty good, but I'm going to put a little bit more water in here. Worms like moisture. They do not like just a dry environment. So I've got my little bedding in here. Then I'm going to throw my worms right on top of it so that they have a place immediately to go. And then I'm going to immediately feed them something. Now, worms break down things that we break down easily the same way. So bread, which is a real soft material, they'll break down almost immediately. I actually have a bunch of apple peels that somebody brought me for Christmas because they know me. And I'm going to probably stick those apple peels in here in 3 or 4 days. But for right now, I want these little guys to do nothing but eat and breed. So I'm going to stick just a chunk of bread in there that's not real pleasant anymore. I have a tendency not to eat the ends, so they generally go to my worms. I have a couple more pieces in here, but they're going to go to the boys outside who haven't been fed in a week, so we're going to go with that. Now I'm going to stick the rest of my paper down on top so that my little worms here have coverage, because they don't really like hanging out in the daylight. Alright. Now, after this, I don't have a cup of water here. I'm actually going to take this over to my sink and splash a little water on there. You don't want it to be sopping wet. You don't want it running out the bottom. You want all of this to pick up the moisture. So what you really want to do is use, as opposed to just pouring it on there, you want to use a little, maybe a sprayer or a mister or something like that. If you have no patience and you know, you just want to get it done, go ahead and take about a cup of water and try and splash it around a little bit. After I'm done with the water, stick your lid on, snap that sucker into place, and that's it. You are ready to go. Put this under your kitchen counter or maybe in your pantry somewhere dark. Do not put it directly down onto concrete. The concrete gets a little cold and all the worms stop moving around after that. So if you're going to put this down on the floor somewhere, get a little booster for under it, or maybe a towel or something that, you know, can keep it off that concrete, just to keep the air circulating around it, keep it from getting too cold in one place or another. I'm going to leave this it's sealed up for probably a week, maybe 5 days, and I will show you what happens in a week. But you should be fine. This is it, and go for it. Now you are green and happy, and so are your worms.